Hi there, everyone. It's Wednesday and it's time for another music moment. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the music you hear in morning and evening prayer. Our Reverend Bob Blackwell did a wonderful job summarizing the history of how morning and evening prayer came into being, and we really haven't explored it very much at Holy Trinity. And one of the silver linings of this pandemic has been exploring the morning prayer liturgy. There's a possibility that we're going to explore evening prayer liturgy when we can see each other in person because communion's a little more complicated, and non-Eucharistic services that don't have communion, are usually either a morning or an evening prayer service. I'd like to talk specifically about the pieces you hear after the Old Testament readings and after the New Testament readings. You've heard some of this music on the videos that we've put out, and these pieces that we're singing, like the Te Deum, are called canticles. And the definition of a canticle is it's a psalm-like piece, a psalm-like text that's not a psalm. So it's not one of the 150 Psalms of David, but this other poetic sacred text that is sung, and they're very psalm-like, but they aren't psalms. So already we see that we have a lot of music in morning and evening prayer because we have a psalm already. Now we're adding really two more psalm-like psalms, not psalms, but canticles, after the Old Testament reading and after the New Testament reading. And in your Book of Common Prayer, you will find 14 distinct canticles that can be used at these services. And they're actually numbered 1 through 21 because the first 7 of those 14 canticles, there's a Rite 1 version. Even though it's the 1979 prayer book, there are Rite 1 texts for the first 7 canticles. So these canticles can be biblical. We have 3 that come from the book of Luke: the Song of Zechariah, the Song of Simeon, the Song of Mary. We have 4 Old Testament canticles: the Song of Moses and the 3 songs of Isaiah. And why do we have 14? Why can't we just keep things simple? Well, if you look in the Book of Common Prayer, this is page 144 and 145, they have the rubric of suggested canticles for morning and evening prayer. So we've been exploring morning prayer, and after the Old Testament reading, if it's not Advent, Lent, or Easter, then you do Benedictus Dominus. That's after the Old Testament reading. And after the New Testament reading, you would do the Te Deum. And we've been using that one. So you've heard that me sing that. You're going to hear some other people singing that in the coming weeks. Right now it's Easter, so if we were doing the full morning prayer liturgy, we'd do the Cantemus Domina after the Old Testament, and we would do the Te Deum after the New Testament reading. If you look over at evening prayer, things are much, much simpler. If you're doing evening prayer on a Sunday, you're going to do the Magnificat and the Nunc Dimittis. The Magnificat is the Song of Mary from the book of Luke, and the Nunc Dimittis is the Song of Simeon from the book of Luke. And you can see no matter what day of the week you're going to be using evening prayer, one of those 2 canticles is going to show up. You're always going to do the Nunc or the Mag in some form. And most churches do morning prayer on Sunday mornings, so it's rare to hear any of the more obscure canticles because most people stick to the Sunday rubrics. There are some churches, particularly in England, but even in the United States, that will have evening prayer several times a week, and sometimes that's a real opportunity to hear some of the other canticles being sung. For instance, if evening prayer is on a Wednesday, then you would hear the Benedicite after the Old Testament reading, and you'd hear the Nunc Dimittis after the New Testament reading. Composers throughout history have really enjoyed composing settings of these canticles. So, for instance, the Magnificat and the Nunc Dimittis, many composers have composed settings of those for use at evening prayer, and they call that an evening service. So it becomes a genre of music too, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of settings of evening services, those 2 canticles for use in evening prayer. So the next time you hear a strange text, or not really strange, but one that you're not used to hearing during the Eucharist, it's probably occurring after one of the readings, and it is a canticle. I invite you to explore the canticles in your Book of Common Prayer.